Welcome back again to another secondary objective video. This time, we're going to look into the future, which is actually going to be here because we're going to talk about Dataslate predictions. Thanks to our benevolent Lord and Overlord, James Workshop, we're getting balanced Dataslates once a month for the foreseeable because it's the start of 11th. And as part of that, we're going to be able to review every single time that happens and see what kind of changes are coming up. And in this case, I think I've got a pretty good handle on what's going to change, but we're going to have to wait and see. So firstly, if you could like and subscribe, it helps a ton. If you've got TikTok brain and it's really hard to watch these slightly longer videos, head over to Instagram where I post reels and you can see some of the highlights in snippets. So let's get stuck into the data stage, shall we? With the magic of my continuous editing, look at this transition. Whoa. So we're going to look through data state predictions and what we think the next 40k balance update will change. I believe it's going to be next week, but that's guesses. I don't know anything more than you, but fingers crossed. As for how we're going to go through this, so to make things easier, we've kind of color coded stuff. So we're going to talk about a specific rule, the pivot returns, which we'll come on to in a second. We're going to talk about detachment shifts. So I believe a few key detachments are going to be changing from like 3DP to 1DP. I realize I've made a spelling mistake here. And then points are going to be going up and down. And as a quick read, if it's red, that means points are going up. If it's green, it means points are going to go down. So we're going to whiz through some of the key factions. Now, this isn't going to be super comprehensive. I'm just going to cover some of the key stuff. I'm sure there's going to be little tweaks all over the place. So I'm really sorry if I've missed your faction. But if I have missed something important, tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. So in alphabetical order, we're going to start with the Aeldari. So Aeldari right now are suffering from the sins of what they did to us in 10th edition. And I was there with you guys, getting smashed by these elves that were moving really fast and hitting crazy hard. Their points are quite high at the moment. And I think one of the big problems with Aeldari is because their points are quite high, their armies are quite limited. They don't have much room for like action pieces and kind of flexible armies. They're kind of quite stuck in terms of their roster. So I'm predicting there's going to be points decreases across the board. Maybe not super high, but like a smattering of points decreases across lots of different units, and that will enable the Aeldari to open their roster up and maybe take a mixture of units and get back some of that flexibility that they should always really be famed for. Hopefully, it's not going to be too much because when Aeldari are really strong, everyone has a miserable time. But understandable, the Aeldari players have suffered a little bit now. They should probably have some points decreases. So nothing specific for them, but I think across the board they're going to have some big changes. And then on to Chaos Demons. So Chaos Demons, those of you who watch like War Masters and WTC, you probably saw that there was a flurry of demon players doing super well, especially David Gaylard. He smashed War Masters with a list that had a ton of Blood Crushers and then some other units too. So Blood Crushers seem to be really efficient for their points. They're really, really fast. They're really tough. They do a ton of damage. They're basically like my favourite unit, the Krutox Rampagers, but better in every way, which is really annoying. I believe because of what's happened, I think that's going to result in the Blood Crushers probably getting a big points increase. Now, I will say that I don't think that demon list is actually easy to play. It's easy to just push it forward, but to actually get good results, I think you have to be a really good player. So I do think that will impact those players who maybe aren't the top players. But even so, like Blood Crushers seem a bit too good, and I think their points might increase. I also feel like there might be some changes with the detachments, but I couldn't quite put a pin on it, so I haven't put it in here. But I feel like something might change in terms of which disposition certain detachments get, but we'll have to wait and see. Chaos Knights. So I believe, and this is I kind of referenced this in that second slide, I believe the pivot rule is going to change. Now, pivot used to be a thing in 10th where basically if you had to rotate your base, it would cost you movement. Right now it doesn't. So those models that have like a large oval base, when they move, they actually get extra inches to their movement because their base sticks out further than the other side. So when they spin, they get all this extra movement. If pivot changes, that's going to impact some armies more than others. So Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights we'll get to will both suffer because they're going to lose an awful lot of movement. And their points right now are pointed because of how they've been performing with pivot. So with pivot going away, I think there's going to be a slight reduction to those big knights. Maybe not crazy, but a little bit of points cost might just help keep them in line with everything else in the game. Then we have Chaos Space Marines. So Chaos Space Marines have been absent from tables for a little while, and I think part of it is they've got a lot of 3DP detachments, so some of their best ones don't have that flexibility that other factions do. And because of that, I think you're seeing that Chaos Space Marine players are going off and pivoting to other detachments and other armies, sorry, not other detachments, to other armies, and they're using those instead of their beloved Chaos Space Marines. So what I'm hoping will happen is Chaos Space Marines will have some point decreases on select units, which might then allow those players to come back because they think, right, we've got a bit more play with Chaos Space Marines, and we might be able to see a bit more of this faction on the tabletop because I've not seen them at tournaments for a little while now. Adeptus Custodes. So Adeptus Custodes have been smashing the meta recently. If you looked at the Games Workshop Open, the Newport Open, Custodes placed really highly. Custodes in general have got a pretty decent win rate right now. But it's also not just about their win rate, because whilst they're doing quite well on the top tables, even if they're not necessarily smashing tournaments, they're performing quite well. It's the middle tables that they're the problem because they're such a stat check and they're so durable. They're actually kind of being a big, a big wall almost that when certain players hit them, they just can't get through them, and so that's causing problems for some of those other tables too. I think Custode's biggest change is probably going to be a detachment. I think Lions of the Emperor probably is going to go up to 3 CP. Lions of the Emperor is really strong on its own, and combining it with other 1DP detachments is very, very strong. So, in my opinion, I think if you up Lions of the Emperor to 3 CP, it's going to change some of the playstyle slightly and may cause some of the stronger stuff to drop down a little bit. Dark Angels. So I made a video on this recently. Dark Angels have been crushing everyone on the top tables at the moment. They're the main combo, which is Company of Hunters and Dark Flight Pursuit, basically means you take every single speeder that you possibly can take, and they ignore every single rule in the game and do everything phenomenally well. I think that's a fairly strong example as to where we might see some changes. So, firstly, on the detachment side, I think Company of Hunters is going to go up to 3 CP. Like the Custodes that we just talked about, being at 2 CP, it's too good because you can combine it with some other really good detachments. So making it 3 CP is going to hit that on the head and could mean that if you want to run that detachment, you're going to have to focus on a certain thing. You might not get the Dark Flight Pursuit rules too. Secondly, some of the Dark Angels units are so affordable for what they do. So some examples for me are the Lion, Deathwing Knights, and the Landspeeder Vengeance. So for the Lion and Deathwing Knights, they are uber durable and they're able to sit and control the center of the board or your expansion. And for the price, they're nearly impossible to kill without overcommitting. So they are really strong. And the Landspeeder Vengeance also, mainly in conjunction with these other two detachments I talked about, is super strong. It could be that with moving Company of Hunters to 3 CP, the Landspeeder Vengeance doesn't need to change, but it's hard to say, and it would be annoying to make that change and then still to see them tear everyone to bits. So if it was me, slight points increase, Company of Hunters goes up as well. Imperial Knights, exactly the same as Chaos Knights, so I won't belabor it. With Pivot coming back, in my opinion, I think Imperial Knights will need some slight points drops just to keep them even with everyone else. Orks. So I've put Orks in, although with Ork Codex coming out this weekend, this doesn't really need to go over it. But if the Ork Codex wasn't coming out, these are the kind of changes I think points would go up again. But with that in mind, they've had a good run. They're going to get a new Codex. Let's see what that brings. Space Marines. So Space Marines, again, as you've probably heard in other videos, Space Marines are a faction where their effectiveness is mitigated because of how many players there are. So when you look at the stats, it's hard to see how well Space Marines are actually doing because there are so many players that are not necessarily doing super well that are kind of bringing the result down a little bit. But with that in mind, Space Marines are still doing very very well, especially on top tables, especially in conjunction with Dark Angels too. So some points increases on some of the big offenders will encourage some more internal balance, and you might see some different lists come out. So land speeders are in every single list. The Dark Angels list, there's loads of them, but every Space Marine list has like one or two because they're so cheap and they do so much damage. So a bit of a points increase for land speeders makes sense to encourage players to use other things. Terminators are everywhere, both assault terminators and the tactical regular terminators too. The points increases need to go on those guys as well. We all thought that with the changes to cover, 2+ armor saves weren't going to be as good. Turns out, still really, really good, especially with -1 to hit. So Terminators probably need a bit of a points increase and to encourage people to move away from the Look at my giant 10-man units of unkillable dudes. Let's play something a bit different. And then lastly, the Land Raider Redeemer is so cheap for the amount of firepower it puts out, and it's so hard to kill. The fact that they're in a ton of lists kind of shows how good they are. The Land Raider Redeemer does need a slight points increase. Again, just discourage people from taking all of them all the time. And then only two more left. So Tyranids. Tyranids right now, I think, are one of the best armies in 11th edition. They're so good. They can take so many durable bodies, so much high OC. Shadows in the Warp is game breaking if it goes off, especially you can do it turn one now and have units battle shocked all game. Tyranids are really good. All that being said, I've only suggested that Norns get a bit of a points increase. I think Norns right now for the points are really cheap, and it's easy to take a couple of them and just dominate objectives without really any recourse, unless your opponent has the exact kind of weapons that are needed to kill those Norns. So a slight points increase again will encourage Tyranid players to run some different units and change the list up a little bit. And then lastly, we have World Eaters. So World Eaters have been struggling a lot in 11th edition. The changes to like terrain stops them staging so well. They're not as fast as they probably should be. They typically just get advance and charge on one thing, and then when they move 8 inches, that's not that good. I don't really know what to suggest for World Eaters. So points decreases would help, but there's only so far you can do it until you end up with like a horde army, and the points are quite low at the moment. So I'm not really sure if points alone is going to fix World Eaters. I almost feel like they need changes to their army rules or to their detachments or something to help out. Like they almost just need advance and charge on everything, and then suddenly they could make it work. I think. So I'm predicting some points decreases, but I just don't think it's going to be enough unless they just go crazy cheap, and then you're going to get swarmed by a horde of angry idiots with axes, which I would enjoy because I play World Eaters, but I would like some sort of a rule change, I think, over the top of it. Um, so that's the kind of overview of all the changes. What kind of, I guess, overall is I think the pivot change alone is going to make huge changes to the game, and it's going to help make vehicles a lot fairer, bikes, knights, all kinds of stuff. It's just going to make movement a lot cleaner because right now it's kind of crazy some of the stuff you can do. I think the 1 CP tax is going to change slightly. So Custodes and Dark Angels detachment moving to 3 CP, 3 DP, sorry, is going to make it so those 1 DP detachments aren't just going to jump in and push things to be a little bit too overpowered. Some of the strongest armies like Orks, Space Marines, Tyranids, Demons, I think the auto includes for those armies are going to get a bit more expensive, which is going to encourage some slight differences on the list. And then lastly, some of the struggling armies, I think points have to decrease. Other than that, they get sweeping changes to detachments, but that feels a bit strong right now. So Aeldari, CSM, World Eaters, hopefully they'll get cheaper and it's going to make those players a little bit happier. So that's the kind of the overall view. I hope that all made sense. I'd be interested to see whether you agree or disagree or you think anything different's going to happen. But let's wait and see how right and how wrong I was. Maybe I'll do a tier list on my own views next week and see whether that actually panned out. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it and don't forget your secondary objectives.